So we're going to jump back into the inquiry and have a look at whether what disclosures were made to the defendant in this case, Mr. McLaughlin, following the accusation that he had stolen money from his post office. Indeed, we're going to have a look over his witness statement from 2004 and in particular the request that he made for disclosure and whether Suzanne Winter can confirm whether inquiries were made based on the disclosures that he requested and whether indeed that evidence was actually ever disclosed to his legal team. Let's jump into the inquiry.
Could we have back on screen, please, Mr. McLaughlin's defence statement, which is AMCL 5035, and it's page 5 of that document, please. Scrolling down, please. Mr. McLaughlin made a number of disclosure requests in this defence statement.
So we're seeing a bit more from what we've seen previously because we saw any and all information. So he requested to be disclosed to allow him to actually, defend himself, which is reasonable. Any and all information in whatever form recorded indicating the version of offence inconsistent with the Crownies and consistent with the defendant's innocence. So as in, that should have surely been in the initial disclosure anyway, but now he's formally requesting it again. If they didn't do it, there could be some trouble there. Any other notes, documentation, or memoranda relating to the incident or investigation thereof, any and all records compiled by the investigating officer, including the officer's report on the incident, full audit reports for the business for audits carried out prior to the 26th of July 2001, full details of audits and findings for audits carried out on 26th of July 2021, if any, full details of trial balances retained by the Post Office not already disclosed, so clearly they've disclosed some of that already, full history of details of accounts reports submitted by the defendant for the period relevant to the charges, whether submitted automatically by computer or otherwise. So presumably he would have access to records he submitted, but any data the computer was generating and submitting back logged in the Fujitsu Horizon data center, obviously he wouldn't have access to. Any relevant reports and assessments retained by the Post Office relating to Brookfield Post Office, which was Mr. McLaughlin's post office. Details of trading after the defendant ceased having any direct role in the business, including details of any significant and unexplained losses or balancing problems and other accounting errors that were present. To be fair, it all seems very reasonable. He's wanting the information necessary to prove his case and defend himself, which, it is a reasonable request because it's very hard to defend yourself if you just know the accusation and you're not sure of the evidence when you're convinced you've not done it.
And the paragraph above the Roman numerals that follow, the defendant requires any further material to be disclosed that assists with his defence as now disclosed. Any material that undermines the credibility or reliability of the witnesses in the case or the allegations made should be disclosed forthwith. And then there are some, in particular, disclosure requests made below, and these include full audit reports at D for the business for audits carried out prior to the 26th of July, full details of the audit findings from the 26th of July, full details of the trial balances retained by the Post Office.
Those things should actually obviously presumably form part of the case anyway, so you'd presume that's an easy thing to comply with.
Full history of the details of the accounts and reports submitted by the defendant for the period relevant to the charges. And then scrolling down a little, please. Details of trading after the defendant ceased having any direct role in the business, including details of any significant and unexplained losses and or balancing problems and or other accounting errors that were present. And then below that, any or all documentation or material in whatever format showing or tending to show that the defendant had ongoing difficulties in balancing the accounts from the time he took over the franchise. And below that, any and all documentation or material in whatever format showing or tending to show that the computer operating system that the defendant was obliged to use was prone to error and or faults, not limited.
So, essentially, he's set out his defence. He's now saying you need to set out your case, which, if they're convinced of his guilt, shouldn't actually be an issue, you would have thought.
Only to faults. Over one more, please. Experienced by the defendant, but also general reported or discovered faults across the system as experienced by other post office franchises in a position similar to the defendant. And then last of all, any and all documentation or material in whatever format showing or tending to show the post office consignia was aware of all the account balancing problems and errors in the system that the defendant was experiencing. Were you
Wow, and we can see from the date of that statement it's 2004, 20 years ago.
Involved in dealing with these disclosure requests? Can you recall?
I can recall I would have been involved with them, yes.
At this stage, did you have knowledge of any other problems with Horizon causing balancing issues being experienced by other subpostmasters or post office employees?
No.
Did you make inquiries as to whether there was knowledge within the post office of other cases where this was the case?
Yes.
And what was the result of those inquiries?
Every time the story was always the same, that Fujitsu had assured the post office the Horizon system was completely reliable.
Well, clearly it was not, because Fujitsu obviously are saying that it wasn't now and it did have bugs. But appreciate that may have been what she was actually told at the time. So.
And in relation to that last item requested, again, did you make inquiries in this regard for documentation or material showing or tending to show that the post office consignor was aware of all of the account balancing problems and errors in the system that the defendant was experiencing?
That information would have been requested through the casework team and for them to provide that information to me. I cannot recall if it came through, but certainly any requests would have been put forward to the casework team. If I was unable to get the information in Northern Ireland, it would go to them to see if they could get me the information. It would also be discussed. You also have to bear in mind that everything that has been requested to me would be discussed with the police and with the prosecution office. Once I would put a file in to the police, then you always had meetings with them and the crime prosecution office.
You were in a position, though, of advantage, weren't you, over the police and the prosecuting service, because you had access to information within the post office and could more easily discuss with your colleagues and your seniors what the position was in terms of, in particular, a state of knowledge?
Yes, but if someone has asked me to investigate any information on the computer and how good it is, I will do that. And if I found out anything that was wrong with that computer, I would disclose it.